Today I'll be speaking to you about the language of creativity. So, what do we mean when we say that something is creative? This is a central question that my research seeks to address. You might take a moment to think about what creativity means to you and how you might go about measuring it. One thing we know is that creativity is multifaceted. It comes in many forms, from novels to musical composition or visual artwork. Here, we focus on the domain of language, specifically the writing of creative short stories. Semantic distance is a measure of relatedness between two concepts. The application of semantic distance to creativity assessment is based on the associative theory of creativity, which characterizes creative thought as novel and useful recombination of semantic knowledge. According to this view, the integration of more semantically distant concepts is considered more creative, and a growing number of studies have applied computational methods to quantify semantic distance in relation to creativity. Divergent thinking is a well-established laboratory measure of creativity involving the production of multiple solutions to open-ended problems. It is most commonly assessed via the alternative uses task, or the AUT, which prompts participants to generate unusual and creative uses for common objects. In our 2021 paper, we examined the relationship between computational measures of semantic distance and human ratings of creativity for AUT responses. We leveraged computational semantic models to provide an objective measure of semantic distance between the AUT prompt, for example, a brick, and the alternative use, like using it as a doorstop. Additionally, we had human raters independently score the creative quality of each response. And what we see is a robust association between semantic distance and human ratings of creativity, highlighting the potential application for semantic distance in creative assessment. Over the past couple of years, we've witnessed a huge surge in popularity and public interest in generative AI with the advent of large language models like GPT-3. These models are capable of generating coherent, nuanced, and potentially creative textual output. Some studies have begun to empirically test these large language models on divergent thinking tasks, suggesting that generative AI is approaching human-level performance, at least on these standard measures of creativity. For the purpose of this research, we view large language models as a new source of data to examine our central question, which is trying to define the features of creative writing. So how do we do this? In the present study, we implement a short creative writing task in which participants were presented with 3 words and asked to combine them into a short story. We collect a total of 600 stories, half from human participants online and half from GPT-3. In a second step, we had an independent sample of human raters online assess the creativity of each story, and they were blind to whether it was written by a human or by a computer. The stories were assessed on a 1 to 5 scale, and we compute the average creativity score across 12 ratings. In a third and final step, we quantify features of text that we thought might be relevant predictors of creativity. I'll describe them more in just a moment. So for these analyses, we fit 3 linear mixed effects models controlling for the prompt used to create the story and the word count. Then we describe the semantic features of stories that are associated with creativity. And finally, we explore whether human and computer-generated stories are different in terms of their creative quality. Divergent semantic integration, or DSI, is simply an extension of semantic distance. It captures the extent to which a story connects semantically divergent ideas. Rather than comparing the distance between 2 words, DSI captures the extent to which the whole story, so in this case, a narrative short stories, connect semantically distant concepts. To give you a sense of how this looks, here's an example of a low DSI story. So given the prompt stamp, letter, and send, this participant combined them in a pretty generic way, saying that the letters were stamped and ready to send. Alternatively, this is a high DSI story. Given the same prompt, this participant describes the letter, the stamp on the letter, how it looked cartoonish with faded colors and tattered edges. And so just from this brief excerpt, you can see a kind of expansion of semantic space. Accumulating evidence suggests that episodic memory and episodic simulation may also contribute to creative thinking. To complement the existing research illustrating the role of semantic distance in creativity, we were interested in whether the presence of perceptual details would be associated with creativity. Our reasoning here is that sensory details with descriptions of smells, tastes, and sounds might allow a reader to more deeply engage with the narrative. Thus, in the present study, we examined perceptual details as a predictor of creative writing. This leads to two main hypotheses. First, we expect semantic distance, as measured by the DSI, would be a strong predictor of creativity ratings. Second, we hypothesized that perceptual detail, serving to transport the reader to alternative times and places, would also be predictive of creativity. Turning now to the results. Consistent with our previous findings, we observe a strong positive association between semantic distance, or DSI, and our creativity ratings. This pattern was consistent within the sample of human stories and GPT-3 stories. Additionally, we observe a modest correlation between perceptual details and creativity within human and GPT-3 stories. These descriptive analyses indicate that both semantic distance and, to a lesser extent, perceptual detail are associated with creativity. We then fit our regression model, and as hypothesized, we find that both semantic distance and perceptual detail are significantly associated with creativity. This model explains approximately half of the observed variance in creativity ratings with an R-squared of 0.56. In a second model, we test for an interaction, and indeed, we observe a significant interaction between DSI and perceptual detail. This finding suggests that the most creative stories are those which combine perceptual details with semantically distant concepts. In a third model, we use condition of human versus GPT-3 as our main predictor of creativity, and we do not observe any significant difference between human and computer-generated stories. This suggests that AI models are approaching or perhaps have reached human level of creativity within the context of these short story tasks. So in conclusion, the present study contributes to a growing body of research on verbal creativity. Our results indicate that creative writing involves the integration of semantically distant concepts with perceptually descriptive information. This pattern of results was consistent within samples of human and GPT-3 stories. Furthermore, this study provides evidence that GPT-3 can generate stories comparable in creativity to those written by humans. While we do not wish to claim that large language models have an experience of episodic remembering or imagination as humans do, we do suggest that creative writing in both humans and AI makes use of perceptual detail in addition to connecting semantically distant concepts. Future research could explore how the precise wording of a prompt may influence the resulting story. For example, if we instruct participants to write with lots of perceptual details or make remote associations, might that enhance the creativity of the resulting story? Despite abundant cognitive research on the generation of creative ideas, relatively less is known about the evaluative phase of creativity. Another area for future investigation involves training AI models to provide reliable and automated assessments of creative output. Lastly, we're working on a project currently exploring how semantic distance may relate to AI-generated artwork. So we're exploring, for example, the extent to which the prompt of DALL-E 2, the semantic distance of that prompt, might it predict the creative quality of the resulting artwork. And with that, I would just like to thank my collaborators, my advisor Dan Schachter, members of the Schachter Lab, and members of the Harvard community. Thank you all very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.